That's not Patrick. Hold on, let me ask to unmute him.
Anyway, Spec, go ahead and
Hello.
send Walter Blicky the code.
Hello.
No, what's up, Patrick? Alright, fuck it. Yo, Devin, you kind of look like Venya.
Venya?
Yeah,
I don't know who that is.
the person. Yeah.
Anyway, turn on your cameras, gamers, because we want Walter Blicky to see our faces according to Walter Blicky.
I sent him the link, by the way.
Okay. You guys can check this out at the X Divinity YouTube channel.
Oh my god, that's how I think. Therefore, I am. Oh, is that the
Dude,
real Warren Mosler?
literally, even if the action axiom was apostolori, what does it matter?
Po-
Is it wrong?
a what?
Shut up.
Yeah, bro.
Apostolori.
There's no L in it.
Apostolori. Shut up, nerd.
Okay. Yeah, you can still ask questions. Did Patrick leave and join back?
If you guys want to have questions, we're gonna go ahead and ask our like reviewed questions. And then if I talk to you about having a question, if you like DM me about having a question for Walter Blicky, DM me on the Zoom thing so I can see it. DM me your question and we should be good. I know that somebody asked me a question about Zionism. Can you say slurs? No, Nat. You cannot say slurs in here. Yes, I'll ask that for you, X. I have a question, Spec. It says, if artificially low interest rates cause inflation, then how come this didn't happen in 2010 when the interest rate was very low, but deflation was also low? X, if you want, I'll unmute you and you can ask that. Is that fine for you?
What happened in
Just
2010?
just nod your head yes or no. Yeah, okay, that's good for you. I'll let you ask
Wait,
that.
what was the question? I heard something about recessions.
He was like, if it artificially lows interest rates, how come this didn't happen in 2010? X, also, if you
Yeah,
can have like
because it's a ceteris paribus claim.
if you would have like a proper name besides X, that'd be cool. I'm gonna change my name off of Divinity really quickly.
And you also can't gauge the amount like time preferences or interest rates would be off from time preferences like the different liquidity trap. Yeah, kill yourself. Kill yourself.
Um,
Oh, Alex is in here.
Let's Popovic. What's him?
What's him, Alex? Hold up, let me ask to unmute him.
So, and then I think also someone had a question about.
What's up?
Is Craig
uh,
joining?
yo,
I don't know.
is Venak in here? I might be saying your name wrong. Is Venak in here? Yeah, what's up, Doc? You can ask your question about Zionism. By the way, Spec, his question is, can I ask Walter Block his thoughts on locking homesteading and its application to Zionism?
Vena? Venya?
Venyak. It's a Ven and then it says Yak Dog.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Fucking shit. Ugh.
What's happening?
Anyway, this is being a live stream, so please don't do anything stupid, bro. Please.
All right. So who wants a reading of Democracy the God that failed right now?
It's 218.
218.
Oh,
Wait, Alex, do you have any like? Hold on, let me send you the. Do I
Any
have your
questions?
email?
I don't have any questions.
All right, never mind.
average.
I've
I'll
talked to
go ahead
Block a
and
million times.
Hey, sad
go ahead and-
Norwegians in here.
I'll go ahead and get my
Actually, wait,
internet.
no, I do have a question. Actually, I want to ask him.
Well, what was it?
I'll text it to you.
Oh no. It's that kind of question. Okay, we're just gonna go down the
Hey,
list, right?
Patrick.
Spec, I'll ask the first question. Just put a dash next to put a dash at the beginning of the question.
Oh no, I want to ask this first question.
No.
You can
I
ask
said
the
I'm
first question,
gonna ask the first. I'm gonna ask this one. Right
Yeah. Hold on, let's like.
here. One. No, I'm just putting a what's it called? I'm just putting like a dash next to it. Okay, somebody asked. Can I ask, do you believe in elastic money supplies pokes a hole in the ABC?
What the?
Check your Discord DMs.
Nat asks me, can I
this is gonna
ask
be
about
something
black
racist.
peeps?
If
No.
not, it's normal.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, Yona raised.
Anna's in here. What?
Oh no, Anna's gonna call someone a slur. Fuck.
Don't unmute her.
Yeah, then I'm meet Anna. Typical racist. Let me style my hair like a conservative so Block accepts me, bro.
Just gonna cut it off.
Shut up.
Ooh.
I look
Bring
like
him.
such, I look like such a chatter now, squad.
You do, Liam.
For real, oh god. I do look like such a fucking conservative. Holy shit.
You're based.
Alice Blatt's block his thoughts on ethno-nationalism.
Oh my god.
Block, what are your thoughts on a Hoppian covenant that excludes certain races? He'll be like, well, it's property rights. So Block answered the dog problem like such a Chad. He was just like, it's immoral, but I mean, hey, bro, you're your dog for real. I'm like, that's facts. That's facts. Can I say slurs? No, Patrick. Divinity, ask him about evictionism. I'll be like, Walter Block, why are you wrong on evictionism?
We got a whole one person watching the stream right now.
What a chat on God. Probably is. Okay, well, Walter Blicky should be joining soon. I think that's, I don't know if that's him. Let Walter Blicky inspect. Liam become an objectivist? Oh no, you should become an objectivist first. Like, bro, what? Okay, that's Walter Block. Let me ask him to unmute really quickly. Hello?
Hi.
Hey, okay, I think we have I think we should be good to start. We have a lot of people here. We have more people with faces and cameras this time, so
Good.
I'll just go and do a little bit of an introduction again. So as we know from the last time, this is Walter Block. This is world famous Austrian economist, libertarian, free thinker, founder of evictionism. He's also done an interview with us before. That was really fun. I thought it was really productive. And we're just going to be running it back for a second time. If you want to say anything before we start, Mr. Block, you can do that. Yeah, do you have any thing you want to say before we start, Mr. Block? Walter?
I'm glad to be with you. I had a great time last time, and I'm looking forward to more of the same. A lot of great questions, good challenges, and hopefully we got 1 millionth of an inch closer to the truth with a capital T.
All right, nice. So I guess first question, there's a lot of debate in the libertarian community over whether owning a nuke would be an initiation of force. Do you think somebody could possess a weapon like a nuke without violating property rights? If so, why or why not?
Yeah, I think that you could have a nuke without violating property rights if we lived on Jupiter and we all had houses with land of, I don't know, 10,000 square miles or something like that. And we all had our nuke right in the middle so that if it exploded, it would only impact ourselves. But on this Earth, I don't think we can do that. Not even if one person owned all of, I don't know, Siberia, or one person owned all of, I don't know, the desert in Africa, or the Greenland, somewhere in the middle of Greenland. I think even there, but I'm not sure. I'm not a physical scientist. I'm not a chemist or a physicist, so I don't know just how widespread the effects of the nuclear bomb would be. But I think that we couldn't have it on Earth. And I might be wrong. Maybe if one person owned the whole Sahara Desert and he stuck a nuclear bomb right in the middle of it, that would be okay. But I have a principle. And the principle is, if it's a threat, you can't do it, because libertarianism says we have the non-aggression principle. And the non-aggression principle says not only are you not supposed to initiate violence against other people, and I think exploding a nuclear bomb would be on other people's property would be a violation of rights, but you're not even supposed to threaten it. And I regard, keeping an atom bomb in your basement in the big city as a threat. So I don't think you can do that. Now, how about dynamite? Well, the government, I think, is not so bad on this. If you want to store dynamite, if you're a contractor, you're a road builder, and you have to knock off a mountain sometime, you can have dynamite. But you can't keep it in your basement in the middle of a city. You have to keep it out somewhere in the boonies and the sticks. And you have to be far enough away from your neighbors such that if the whole thing blows up, you don't affect your neighbor. So I think the government is pretty good on this. They're not bad on everything. I mean, how they get financed is a different issue. But I think, so that would be my answer, that yes, you can have a nuclear bomb, but you have to have so much territory that you don't pose a threat to anyone else. And on this earth, I think you can't have it, but I'm not sure. But nobody owns the entire Sahara Desert or the entire Greenland or anything like that. So for all intents and purposes, don't have a nuclear bomb.
Okay. Yeah, that answered my question pretty well. Adam, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah. So my question is just like, what do you think the optimal way of achieving a free society is, or an anarcho-capitalist society?
Well, that's a good question. And my answer to that is no, there is no one right way to do it. And I asked myself, well, who are the most successful in promoting liberty? And for my generation was clearly Ayn Rand. I mean, Ayn Rand came out with this book in 1957, which was before you were born and before your parents were born, and maybe your grandparents before them too. I'm not sure about your grandparents, but certainly your parents. And even now it's selling 100,000 copies a year. For your, maybe not your generation, I'm not sure, but your parents' generation, and maybe your generation, who is the most successful person in promoting liberty? Ron Paul, head and shoulders over anyone else. Now, Milton Friedman, I think, comes in third place in terms of just numbers of people who converted to the Free Society. But he was a long way after Ron Paul and Ayn Rand. And so I said, well, what do these people have in common? And the answer is virtually nothing, except they both promoted liberty and free enterprise. But, Ron Paul is a sweetie pie. I mean, he sort of exudes goodness. I mean, he just sort of, I don't know, has this aura of niceness. Whereas Ayn Rand did not have an aura of niceness. I mean, you tell Ayn Rand she's a sweetie pie and she's going to smack you upside the head. She was very different. Her personality was very different. And from this, I deduce that there's no one right way to do it. Now, how are we now doing it? You ask, well, what's the best way to do it? So let's ask, what are we now doing? Well, we have think tanks in, I think, 50 out of 50 states. In my state of Louisiana, it's the Pelican Institute. Most states have some sort of think tank like that. There's the Fraser Institute in Canada. There are many Rothbard Institutes and Mises Institutes around the world. There are national groups like the Mises Institute and I don't know, Cato and Reason and other places like that. So there are lots of think tanks. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is the Free State Project. Everyone should move to New Hampshire. I'm sure you people are all aware of that. We should all move to New Hampshire and then we can outvote the bad guys and, have liberty that way. I think that's a nice way to do it. I'm not moving to New Hampshire. I have a job in Louisiana, but I think that's a good way also. And then there are universities. I'm a professor at Loyola University. And by the way, if any of you are interested in going to college and want to have a sympathetic professor, not just me, but I have several colleagues who are all free market Austrian libertarians. So that's another way. And there are many universities. When I first started, and my career as a libertarian in 1964, there were no universities that really stood out for that sort of a thing. Nowadays, there's, I don't know, Texas Tech, there's George Mason, there's Troy University. That's just in the United States. The University of Chicago used to be very free market. I'm not sure now how much it is, but there are a lot of universities. Those are the 3 or 4 that I mentioned have more than 4 or 5 professors who are all free enterprise. But then there are many, many other universities where there's just one. For example, at next door Tulane, there are two libertarians. So another way to promote liberty is everyone go out and get a PhD in economics or philosophy or something relevant to libertarianism or law and go teach in a law school. Another way is write a novel like Atlas Shrugged. Another way is make a movie. My favorite cartoon character is what's his name? Cartman from South Park. Those guys are libertarians, and I see Evan has a sympathetic smile at the. I mean, South Park is a very libertarian TV show, and it probably gets a lot of people into liberty. And you know, if we had a rock and roll singer or a rap singer who could rap about freedom is great or something like that, that would be good. So these are many ways of promoting liberty. And my idea or my suggestion is everyone should do whatever is the most fun for them. If you're not into getting a PhD in economics, but you're more into making movies, make movies for God's sakes. And if you're into making movies, don't get a PhD or whatever. The idea is being in the libertarian movement should be fun. And if it's not fun, you're going to burn out pretty soon, and you're not going to be helping promote liberty. So, like right now, what you guys are doing, Adam, Liam, and all of you, we're having a seminar on Zoom. This is a way of promoting liberty. So, what you guys are doing, you've got this little group of people, and you're all interested in liberty. That's yet another way. So, my answer to the question, I'm sorry to be so long-winded. I'm a professor. I'm never supposed to be succinct. Is do whatever works best for you, whatever is the most fun for you.
Okay. So, do you agree with or have any contentions to Konkin III's agorist praxis of counter-economics to achieve anarchy, basically engaging in gray and black markets so that the state doesn't benefit from market transactions? Would you think that's a good way to achieve ANCAP?
Well, I didn't mention that. Another one I didn't mention was seasteading. David Friedman's son, I forget, Patrick Friedman was involved with seasteading, setting up a community in the ocean somewhere with a bunch of boats tied together, platforms. Konkin was a great guy. I was a friend of his. He and I were, overlapped in our ages. He's unhappily deceased now. He was a good libertarian. And he had yet another way of promoting liberty, namely libertarians should trade only with each other. Well, look, if that's what floats your boat, go do it. And remember, I can hardly attack this because I said everyone should do whatever they want. And here Konkin is doing what he wants. So it would be ill-behooving of me to rain on his parade. However, from an economics point of view, it's sort of crazy. I mean, I have this shirt. Should I only buy shirts from libertarians? Maybe there are no libertarians that make shirts. It's sort of an attack on specialization and division of labor. Look, when I go into Safeway, I don't ask what their political views are, and happily they don't ask what mine are, otherwise they might not sell me anything. I don't know, they might cancel me or whatever. So I think we should take advantage of the marketplace. We shouldn't just buy and sell only from libertarians. Now, look, if there's a tie and you're thinking of hiring somebody for a job, I don't know what the job would be, and one's a libertarian, one's not, and they're equal in every other way, okay, fine, hire the libertarian. But Konkin went way further than that. He had this little community where the idea was you're not supposed to buy or sell to anyone who's not a libertarian. I wonder how, where'd they get their Coca-Cola from or their Wheaties or their butter from? So I'm not really a big fan of that. But on the other hand, I have to be ecumenical. And if that's the sort of a thing that works for you, God bless, go do it. And maybe you'll promote liberty in that way as well.
Okay. Spec, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, sure. I guess the next question would be, what is the criterion for someone to be a rights-bearing individual, and how do children fit into all of that?
That's a good one too, because now you're opening up the question to animal rights. Who are the smartest animals? I think porpoises and who are the ape-type people that are the ape-type people? Chimpanzees, I think, are the smartest. Porpoises and chimpanzees, isn't that right? They're the smartest animals?
Yeah, there's certain monkeys going through the Stone Age right now.
I'm sorry?
There's certain monkeys going through the Stone Age right now, so yeah.
Right, okay. Well, are they rights-bearing creatures? Well, Murray Rothbard, who is my mentor, my guru, my friend, and I don't agree with him on everything, just 99.9% of everything. And on this one, I certainly agree with him. He said, look, suppose we go to Mars and we find creatures there and they look half like a pig and half like an elephant and half like a zebra and half like a snake and half like a cloud. Should we respect their rights? Do they have any rights? And what he said was, well, if they can, assuming no language problems, if they can petition for their rights, and if they can respect our rights, then no matter what they look like, we have to respect their rights. Well, I think if the chimpanzees and the porpoises were 5 times smarter than they are, and also had a moral, attribute, and if they then petitioned us for their rights and promised to respect our rights and did a pretty good job, not a perfect job because human beings don't respect each other's rights that much. We kill each other, we rape each other, whatever it is. If they rose to that level, I would say we have to respect their rights, and none of this slavery for chimpanzees and capturing porpoises and sticking them in a big swimming pool, unless they were willing to do it, voluntary interaction and all. So I'm not a big animal rightser. I don't think that when the lion kills the zebra, the lion is guilty of murder. Whereas if I was an animal rightser, I would say, well, the zebra has rights, and who's this lion? What is he doing? He's murdering a zebra, and he shouldn't be doing that. And I think that that's grotesque and problematic. Okay, now what about babies? Well, the question comes, well, when do human beings start? And my answer is they start with a fertilized egg, because the sperm alone will not eventuate into a human being, and the egg alone will not eventuate into a human being, but the fertilized egg will, if it's in the right environment. And we all need to be in the right environment too. If you plunk us down on the moon with no spacesuit, we'll die. So the fetus has to be in the right spot. And I think that's a human being right then and there. And human beings, all human beings are rights-bearing creatures. And therefore that baby, fetus, a preborn baby, has rights, and we have to respect those rights. So certainly children of 2 years old, they can't respect anyone's rights. They're too stupid. They're just not really fully awake. I have grandchildren, they're 6 years old. I remember when they were 3 months old, they were just sort of blobs. They were just sort of lying there and eating and peeing, and that's about all they could do. Yet they're rights-bearing creatures. If you violate, if you hit a baby, or God forbid, child abuse, you're a evil person. And libertarianism, my version of libertarianism, would say you've committed a crime. So my answer to the question of who are the rights-bearing creatures, all human beings of whatever age, and no one else, as far as I know, with the possible exception of when we go to Mars or Saturn and we find these people from another species, and depending on how they interact with us, they might have rights too.
Okay. Spec, you want to ask another question? You want me to?
By the way, if any of you have a quarrel with what I say, don't let me get the last word on everything. Say where you disagree with me, and then we can, maybe fight about it and intellectually, and get further. So don't take my word as given or something like that. But if you disagree with me, let me know and give me a challenge or what have you. I'm open to dialogue and debate.
So one of the responses, I guess, to something you just said would be like, or what it seems like you're saying is that because humans have this genetic predisposition, this natural capacity to like protest for their rights, we would like consider humans just as an animal to be a rights-bearing individual. But the problem is that some people propose is that some humans are not genetically dispositioned to have such a protest. Like there are certain disabilities that prevent people, or certain genetic conditions that prevent people from protesting for the rights, or ever will be able to engage in any higher level function. And so would you say that these individuals that have genetic dispositions that counter what they would naturally have, would they still be considered rights-bearing individuals?
Oh yeah. When you first spoke, I thought you were thinking of Hitler and Stalin. And he was saying that, maybe they are genetically predisposed not to respect other people's rights.
No.
I don't know. I don't know Hitler and Stalin that well, but I imagine when they were 5 years old, they were like other 5-year-old kids. So I would say we have to respect Hitler and Stalin's rights until they start murdering people. I mean, once you start doing something bad, we don't have to respect criminals' rights. If you get a murderer or a rapist or a thief or somebody like that, we have libertarian punishment theory, and we don't respect their rights. So that would be an exception. I should have mentioned that, and I'm glad that you brought this up. But you're not talking about that. You're talking maybe about mental disability or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, look, 2-year-olds are mentally incompetent, or 2 months old babies are mentally, what's their IQ? 0, or I don't know. I think it goes with the species. I once told this to my son. He said, you better hope that you don't get an intelligent mosquito who promises not to bite anyone, because then we have to respect all mosquitoes' rights. Well, if they all did, then we would. So if you're mentally incompetent, or there was this, I forget this woman, I wish I remember her name, because I use this as an example. And she was lying in the hospital on life support, and she was brain dead. I forget what it was. Does anyone remember that? There was a very famous case. I can't think of her name. She was brain dead, and her family wanted her to stay alive. They didn't want to pull the plug. What happened is that her husband wanted to pull the plug because he wanted to marry some other lady, which is not unexpected or, understandable. And the court unwisely gave him the guardianship rights over her. I would say the guardian of her would be anyone who wants to keep her alive. And her parents wanted to keep her alive, and her siblings wanted to keep her alive. So suppose I went over and I shot her. I'm a murderer. I don't care if she's brain dead. She's a human being, and you can't get worse than brain dead. I mean, even people who are mentally retarded and have an IQ of, I don't know, 25, they're not brain dead. She was brain dead. There was nothing going on upstairs. But if I were to go to that hospital and shoot her or knife her or something, I would be a murderer. So I would say that mentally defectives, human beings, if I can use such a politically incorrect word, I'm not sure how to characterize them in a more sensitive way, but I think we all know who I'm referring to. They have rights. They're human beings. All human beings. Look, the fetus in the womb has got rights, and they're mentally defective in the sense that you can't talk to them, and they can't add 2 + 2 is 4 or whatever. So my answer to the question is all human beings have rights, no matter what their mental capacities are. Look, when we're asleep, we're pretty stupid, right? So is it okay to start shooting sleeping people? Maybe none of us should go to bed tonight.
Yeah. Spec, you're good. Yeah, that answered my question. I agree.
Yeah. My next question to you, I guess, would be whether or not there are any pragmatic policies you hold, both for libertarianism and from an Austrian perspective. So that could be like policies you institute in the Federal Reserve, or it could just be policies for maximizing liberty.
Well, I'm an Austro-libertarian. That is, I'm an Austrian economist. I'm also a libertarian. And yet one of them is normative and the other is positive. Libertarianism is a normative philosophy or a normative science or a normative discipline. It asks what's good and what's bad. Well, not really what's good and bad, more what's legal and what's illegal. And that's all libertarianism does. For example, we don't ask about prostitution or drugs, cocaine, heroin. We don't ask if they're good or bad. We just say, should it be legal for adults to use them? And our answer is yes. Economics is very different than liberty, the discipline of liberty. Economics doesn't ask what's good or bad or what's legal or illegal. It just asks what causes what. What will be the effects of the minimum wage law? Or why do we have minimum wage law in the first place? Or why do we have a male-female income gap? Or why do we have depressions? Why do we have inflation? And what are the causes? What are the effects? Things like that. So if you had a Venn diagram, 2 circles, they wouldn't touch. There's no overlap. And yet it's not uninteresting that virtually all Austrian economists are libertarians. You can't say that virtually all libertarians are economists because are Austrians, because in order to be an Austrian, you have to be an economist first, and not every libertarian is an economist. So there is no overlap. I mean, you can talk about inflation. I think that was the question, or was it the business cycle that was mentioned? You can talk about it from both points of view, but it would be a different point of view. In the one case, from the Austrian point of view, you'd ask, well, what causes inflation? What are the effects of inflation? What causes the business cycle? What are the effects of the business cycle? From the libertarian point of view, you could say, well, the people that create that stuff are criminals, and we ought to put them in jail. And now you have to use Austrian economics to find out who's doing it. I mean, some people say, well, it's unions grasping for higher wages create inflation. There are people who even blame it on the consumer. Now, as an Austrian, I would say, well, that's nonsense. The people who create that stuff are the people in the Fed, central banks and fractional reserve banking and stuff like that. So I hope I've answered the question.
Spec, did that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess that works.
I have a question.
Do you have the all right? Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Stephen Molyneux's universally preferred behavior and his attempt at justifying libertarianism?
I'm a buddy of his. I've been on his show several times. He's a great communicator. He is very voluble and articulate. But could you tell me what that theory of his is? I'm not sure I understand it fully.
Universally preferred behavior. It's similar to Kant's. Well, it's basically the same as Kant's categorical imperative, and that like us as humans have this innate intrinsic value that we all value. And so because we all value something like well-being, or because we all value something like freedom, we can categorically say universally that because we all prefer this behavior, that this is an objective moral fact. And so he uses that kind of like system or framework to say libertarianism is the ethic we go towards because it's universally preferable.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It sounds a little bit like the golden rule,
Yeah.
in such a way that you would want to be treat other people the way you'd want to be treated, that sort of a thing.
Mhm.
I'm not a real big fan of that, because what about the masochist? The masochist wants you to hit him.
Yeah.
I'm a masochist. I'm not really, but let's say I'm a masochist. I want you to hit me or whip me or kick my butt. Or what? That means I can now whip you? No.
Yeah.
So I think that fails because of the masochist. But I am very sympathetic. See, the way I see libertarianism, it's sort of like a what do you call it? A Indian teepee. An Indian teepee has got sticks of about 20 feet long, and they meet at the top, and then there's a little bit sticking out on the top. Well, where they all meet is the non-aggression principle and private property rights. That's the essence of libertarianism. And the bottom part of the stick is, well, what are the implications? What's our view on unions? What's our view on abortion? What's our view on prostitution? What's our view on nuclear weapons in your basement? Well, what are the little sticks at the top? The little sticks at the top are attempts to justify libertarianism defined as non-aggression principle and private property rights based on homesteading. And now you have various theories. One of them is the Bible. God says, be a libertarian. If you're not a libertarian, you're not getting to heaven. So everyone should become a libertarian if you want to have a good afterlife. Another one would be natural rights. Murray Rothbard held that view for a while, and this sounds like what Molyneux is talking about. It's natural for human beings to want liberty. Well, not everyone. I mean, there's Hitler and Stalin and a few other counterexamples. Another one might be Ayn Rand. A is A. Yes, A is A. And from that, she deduces the non-aggression principle. God bless her. I don't know how she does it, but that's magnificent. I'm not a big fan of that because I can't follow it. And I've read it several times carefully, and I'm arrogant enough to think that if I read something 3-4 times carefully and I don't even understand it, well, then maybe it's not only my fault. Maybe it's the problem with what I'm reading. Mm-hmm. My favorite horse in this horse race is Hans Hoppe's argument from argument, or argumentation ethics. And he says, look, the only way you're going to get, I'm paraphrasing, I can't do it as eloquently as he can, but my paraphrase would be, the only way you're going to ever get to the truth of anything, whether it's in physics, mathematics, chess, anywhere, is through arguing, through discussion, through, John Stuart Mill would say, arguing and allowing dialogue. So then Hans says, well, what's necessary in order to have dialogue or debate? And he says, well, you have to own yourself. Because if I say, unless you agree with me, I'm going to punch you, and I'm bigger and stronger than you when you agree with me, well, it's not much of an argument. And then he says, in order to have an argument, you have to be able to sit somewhere or stand somewhere. Well, now we have private property rights. So I'm a very big fan of Hans's attempt to justify libertarianism. But my own interests are not so much how to justify it, but what are the implications of it? That's just my own personal interest, but I applaud Hans for this, and I think it's better than Molyneux's, because Molyneux's is subject to the masochist objection. By the way, I have to tell you my SM joke. My sadist masochist joke is, the masochist says to the sadist, "Beat me," and the sadist says, "No."
Yeah.
Well, you have to be a weirdo to get that joke.
So the yeah, so the categorical imperative, or like Stevens' defense of ethics, is basically like the golden rule. The golden rule is loosely based off of Kant's categorical imperative, and so yeah, they are pretty similar. And I agree. I don't understand how there would be some universally preferred value. That just seems kind of odd to me. Adam, you can ask your question.
Yeah. So, this question was from Alex. What happens to a dead man's property after, if he has no immediate family, so it can't be inherited?
Yeah, that's very inconsiderate of people. I'm 80 years old now. I should probably make a will. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess. Who gets all my books and stuff like that? Very inconsiderate not to have a will, not to die intestate, I think it's called in law, where you don't tell anyone what you want done with your property. A friend of mine just passed away, Bob Wenzel. He had 2 blogs, one for Austrian economics, one for liberty. And I'm not sure what's going to happen with his blog, because I don't think he was very clear as to what he wanted to happen with it. I would say that if a person dies intestate and he's got no family, I mean, the presumption would be that, look, if I die, I have a wife and I have kids, and the presumption would be that I would give it to them. And I think that's reasonable. But suppose I die and I have this farm of 100 acres and I have no relatives whatsoever, no nephews, nothing. Well, it's unowned property. It's more like, what do you call it, virgin territory. The first person that comes and grabs it and starts homesteading is the owner of it. I can't think of any other way to deal with that problem. I don't think the government should get it, because the government are a bunch of criminals and they shouldn't have much of anything. So I would say it'd be very rare, because most people have relatives, even if it's a second cousin. And if the second cousin is the closest to the person who just died, well, then the second cousin gets it, because we assume that people will give it to their relatives. On the other hand, I donate a lot of money to the Mises Institute, not a lot, but a little bit. And Mises Institute might say, well, Walter has set up a presumption that we should get that farm of 100 acres. And I'm not sure how to. And if there was no one else, then I think they would have evidence that I donated money to them and that I really meant to give them my farm. So I'm not a lawyer enough to know how that would work, but I think they would have some sort of presumption ahead of the first person who comes and tries to homestead my farm. But suppose I never donated anything to anyone and I have no relatives, then the first person on my farm who starts farming it is, I think, the proper owner.
Okay. That would make sense to me. What do you think would stop an oligopoly from forming an anarcho-capitalism of the rights enforcement agencies or the private government? What would stop an oligopolization of the market of force?
Very, very good question. Bob Murphy once wrote an excellent, exquisite, magnificent essay on this very question. I forget what the exact title was, something like, "Will the warlords take over?" which is roughly what you're asking. The idea is we have a bunch of private defense agencies, and we have no government. We're all anarcho-capitalists here. And they start amalgamating, and they get bigger and bigger, and then they take over and they become a government. Something similar occurred with Robert Nozick's book, Anarchy, State, and Utopia. Everyone should read that book. It's one of our foundational books for libertarians. And he said that, the dominant agency, but it could have been not an oligopoly, but a monopoly. The biggest one by far would have taken over and in effect become a state. Well, there are very, very good criticisms of Nozick. David Friedman had a good criticism, and Murray Rothbard had a good criticism. Look, what Bob Murphy said is that there's no guarantee that it wouldn't happen. It could happen. I mean, it's not praxeology that it can't happen, but he said that the odds are against it happening, and we have some good empirical evidence. One good empirical evidence would be, how many countries do we now have? About 250 different countries? Has there been any move toward oligopoly, toward, what was it, Brave New World, where you had 3 countries, Oceania, whatever the 3 countries were? No. If you look back over the last 500 years of history, human history, has there been any amalgamation of countries? Is there one country called South America? No, the South American countries are roughly the way they were 50, 100, 200 years ago. Is there any move to join Canada, US, and Mexico? No. How about Europe? Now, Europe might be the best case for this scenario because there is the EEC, or the European Economic Community. But, I don't see that. I mean, Britain just left it. Thank God we had secession. And I don't see any attempt on the part of, Hungary to amalgamate with Spain, or France and Liechtenstein, or something like that. So we have some empirical evidence that there isn't this tendency, this irrevocable, constant tendency to amalgamate and get bigger and bigger, happily. I mean, from an anarchist point of view, I'm not against governments. I just want more of them. I want 7.5 billion of them. We should each have one. We should each be sovereign. So if you want to ask a girl out for a date, you really can't ask her out for a date. You have to get your foreign minister to ask her foreign minister if you can have a date with her. Get it? We have many, many countries. So that was supposed to be a joke, but I guess I'm pathetic at telling jokes. My answer is, to be succinct about it, after babbling for a while, yes, it's possible that oligopoly will take over and we'll have government. We already have government. How much worse can it be? And from an empirical point of view, it's very unlikely that we'll have that, looking back at human history.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's pretty improbable as well. Venya, I'm gonna go and ask you to unmute so you can ask your question.
All right, thank you. So if I remember correctly, you're Jewish, right? What are your thoughts on the application of the Lockean homesteading principle to Zionism and Israel's right to exist?
Well, by chance, I'm coming out with a book on this very question. That's the good news. The bad news, they're going to charge $150 for this stupid book. I guess they're trying to, get libraries to buy it. Hopefully there'll be a lower price eventually, $30, or maybe they'll come out in paperback. I guess I'm a Zionist. I think that Israel is in the right, that the Palestinians are in the wrong. I think if we apply Rothbardian homestead, and by the way, Murray Rothbard and I disagree on this. He thinks that the Israelis are not in the right. In my view, if we go back 2,000 years from now, there were Jews in that area, and there's been a constant lineage of Jews there every time. It's sort of like what happened in South Africa. Originally, my understanding of the South African situation is that originally there were no Black people in South Africa. They were sort of empty. And then came the Boers, the what do you call it, the people from Holland. And they had a very good economy, and a lot of Black people came into the South America from the neighboring states to get those jobs working for the white people. Well, something similar happened with the Israelis and the Palestinians. 2,000 years ago, there were no Palestinians. There were no Arabs in that area. It was Jews. Well, now the Jews did conquer other countries, other peoples, but at one time, before the Romans kicked them out to a great degree, but not all of them, there were just Jews. And the Jews had a better economy than Palestinians. And the Palestinians came into the land that Israel is now in, and they started working for them. But the Jews were there first. The Jews homesteaded that stuff before the Arabs did. Not the whole, I mean, they didn't do it with Egypt, they didn't do it with Syria and other places, but in that area where Israel now is, it's, I think if we apply, strictly speaking, the the libertarian homesteading theory of Locke and Rothbard and Hoppe and Kinsella and other people like that, we find in favor of the Israeli side. Now, you might say, well, how about the right of return? In 48, when Israel started, the 5 or 6 Arab countries started attacking them. And they told the Palestinians to leave so that we could pulverize the Jews more easily. We don't get kill Arabs. Well, those Palestinians that left for that purpose were aiding and abetting a foreign enemy. They were criminals in effect. Given that the Jews were the rightful owners and had every right to have a government. Now, look, I'm an anarchist. I'm against the Israeli government. I'm against all governments, except one for each of us, as I mentioned before. But the usual way that when you attack Israel is not because they're a government. You have to compare them with every other government. And, if you compare Israel with every other government, Israel starts looking pretty good in terms of, I don't know, rights for Arabs, rights for women, rights for homosexuals, rights for all sorts of people. Whereas in those Arab countries, if you're a homosexual in those Arab countries, they'll kill you, which is, not kosher, not libertarian. So I am a Zionist. I believe that Israel has the right to greater Israel. And this book, it's, I don't know, 300 pages worth of stuff. Maybe 1/3 of it makes this case, and the other 2/3 criticize everybody who disagrees with us on this issue. Certainly including Murray Rothbard. We have a one chapter solely devoted to Murray's view on this, which I think is problematic and mistaken.
Okay, so I guess like direct follow-up question. So you would see that it's justified from the American government's perspective and from a libertarian's perspective to be pro-intervention in this kind of foreign war because it upholds property rights and liberty?
Well, I think the U.S. should butt out. I don't think the U.S. should be involved at all. Again, we're now speaking not as anarchists, but as minarchists. The function of each government is to protect its own people. The function of the U.S. government isn't to protect Israel or Jews in Israel. The function of Mexico is not to protect people in France. The function of Hungary government is not to protect people in Namibia. It's to protect people in your own country. The last thing we want is for, governments are bad enough, but we don't want them to interact with each other. It's sort of like, you get 2 animals and put them in a jar and they start fighting with each other. So I think if we have to have governments, and it looks like we do, we should try to keep them separate from each other. And so I certainly wouldn't support the U.S. Helping Israel. Actually, my analysis of this is that the U.S. hurts Israel more than it helps them. Look, the Israelis won the what's that, Sinai Peninsula, fair and square. Mm-hmm. Namely, it was the Arabs that attacked Israel in a previous war, and then Israel ended up with the Sinai Peninsula. And Eisenhower made the Israelis give it up. Made them because Israel is falsely dependent on the U.S. And in any case, the amount of money that the U.S. gives to the Arab countries is double or triple what it gives to Israel, all the Arab countries put together, foreign aid. So if the U.S. just butted out, I think Israel would be much better off, one, because they wouldn't be fighting the Arabs with one hand tied behind their back, worrying about what Pelosi is going to say about it, or what Schumer is going to say about it. And 2, if the U.S. stopped all foreign aid, relatively speaking, they give much more to the enemies of Israel than to Israel. So I think Israel would be much better off if the U.S. just butted out. And not out of there. The U.S. has, 800 military bases in about 130 countries? And they call that defense? I mean, right now, the NBA is having its finals tournament. And everybody who watches the NBA knows when your team is on offense and when it's on defense. It's very clear. When the other team has the ball, you're on defense. and the U.S. calls it defense to have all these military bases in all these countries. How would we like it if Brazilian soldiers were marching around the United States, or soldiers from Pakistan were marching around, and yet soldiers from the United States are marching around all over the place? So I think the U.S. should not only butt out of Israel, but should butt out of everywhere. It should just focus on the U.S. They're not doing that great a job in the U.S. that they should export democracy or whatever that they are exporting to other countries.
Yeah, I think I hold the same position. Spec, you can go and ask your question.
Yeah, sure. So, assuming that we're in an anarcho-capitalist society, and the societal norms have been adjusted so we don't just evolve back into a statist era, do you think that corporations that have established their position via use of the state, like for example lobbying, would they be allowed to maintain themselves? So would it be so? For example, if people decided to to use force in order to topple this corporation's position, would this be an initiation of force? Would this be a retaliation? Would this be like just would it be in accordance with libertarianism? Or would this just be left up to the market economy? Like, force would not be allowed. It's just monetary exchanges.
Well, I think what you're asking about is reparations, not so much from blacks to whites, or rather from whites to blacks, but from the non-ruling class, from the ruling class people to the non-ruling class people. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, when you're against statism, you're also against corporations that are heavily involved with the state. When they get special privileges and special subsidies and bailouts, they're not totally innocent. So we should, take all the, I think the U.S. government owns something like 3/4 of the land area of the country. Maybe that's not exactly right. Well, that land should be taken away from the government. But what about corporations that are hand in glove with the government, Boeing or other companies that are just heavily involved with the government? Are they totally innocent? No, I don't think they're totally innocent. I don't say they all should go to jail, but maybe some of them should. Look, I'm a big fan of the Nuremberg trials. The Nuremberg trials occurred right at the end of World War II, and we were trying to punish the generals and the leaders of the Nazi regime. And their view was, well, we were just following orders. We were just following German law. And according to German law, what you're supposed to do with Jews and gypsies and gays and blacks, you're supposed to kill them. They're all vermin. And that's what we were doing. So leave us alone. And what the Nuremberg trial said, I think correctly, I think it was a libertarian exercise. They said, well, tut, tut, tut. I'm putting words in their mouth. They might not have said tut, tut, tut. But they said, we think there's a higher law than German law. And the higher law is the libertarian law, namely, you're not supposed to be killing innocent people. Well, I think the same would apply. If Ron Paul became president and I don't know, we had a pure libertarian society, we would have to have a little Nuremberg trial. And some politicians would have to go to jail because they violated rights greatly. But would we limit it to just government? No. There are corporations that were hand in glove with the government doing evil things. And we would subject them to a libertarian Nuremberg trial also. So my answer to you is, well, and that corporations too. Well, I mean, corporations, the CEOs or the leaders of the corporation. Look, in the Nuremberg trial, we didn't put in jail the people who washed out the latrines in the concentration camps, and we didn't really worry too much about the corporals and the privates and the sergeants. But if you were a certain officer and above, you were more guilty because you were more criminally oriented. Well, now suppose we have this corporation, the XYZ corporation, is a very bad corporation. How about the guy that pushes the broom and cleans up the XY corporation? Is he going to be in the dock? Not really. But the CEO would be, and the chief executive officers, we would have to look askance at them and see, well, exactly what you did. But it gets very complicated with corporations because some of them were doing it defensively. And if they can make the case that they were doing it defensively, and the only option they had was either cooperating with the government or going broke or going to jail, well, then we would be much lighter on them, and maybe we would declare themselves innocent.
Yeah, I agree with that. So as we know, you voted for Trump in 2020. I know you have your MAGA hat. What were some of the reasons that you voted for Trump in 2020?
Well, let me start with 2016. And a lot of people in the Libertarian Party are angry at me because I had this group, Libertarians for Trump, because I thought Trump would be way better than Hillary. I mean, Hillary was a disaster in every way that you can imagine. Um, Hillary is a warmonger. Hillary is a socialist or a fascist, economically speaking. I mean, and Donald was way better. And but I'm also a member of the Libertarian Party, and I've been a member of the Libertarian Party since 1969. I once ran for office in New York State for the New York State Assembly, and I'm a loyal member of the Libertarian Party, even though some of those people don't appreciate. They think I'm more of a traitor. What I said is, look, if you're in a red or a blue state, vote for the Libertarian, because Donald either doesn't need your vote or he's going to win easily. So if you're in Louisiana, which is a red state, Donald Trump is going to win easily. He doesn't need your vote. Vote for the Libertarian candidate. Or if you're in California, Massachusetts, Donald's going to lose big. He doesn't need your vote. Again, vote for the Libertarian. So I'm trying to show my Libertarian credentials here. And then I said, but if you're in a purple state, like, I don't know, Virginia or Pennsylvania or some state, then vote for Donald, because Donald might need your vote and it's going to be very close. And we don't want Hillary. Okay, now to get to your question in 2020, well, it's the same thing. I mean, what did Donald do? He got pretty good Supreme Court judges, not perfectly libertarian, but much better than what Hillary would have done. He reduced regulations, he reduced taxes. He was pretty good. Not perfect. He was no Ron Paul, no Rand Paul, but he was pretty good. And I thought he'd be way better than Biden. You see what Biden is doing. I mean, Biden is really Bernie Sanders and AOC. So again, I came up with the same idea, Libertarians for Trump in 2020, namely vote for the Libertarian Party everywhere except 4 or 5 states that are purple, and then then vote for Donald rather than Biden. So I think what I was doing was compatible with libertarianism. It would have been really horrible to have Hillary, and it's really horrible to have Biden now. And if we could have had Donald for those, and look, Donald was obnoxious. Look, he comes from Queens. I come from Brooklyn. I understand everyone in Brooklyn and Queens are all obnoxious. So I don't know. I didn't think too badly of him for that. But I understand he was obnoxious, and a lot of people were very ticked off at him for that. But if you look at his policies were way better than the Democratic equivalent. So I make no apologies of having Libertarians for Trump. And if that happens in 2024, I'll do it again.
Yeah, I agree. I think that obviously, like, if your vote's not really gonna be like helping anything or like helping libertarianism, and it's going to be like your vote's gonna definitely impact whether we're gonna have Hillary or Trump, I would have definitely voted for Trump too. Spec, you have a question you want to ask, or do you want me to ask one?
I can ask one. I don't know if, yeah. So there are several like Austrian views on deflation, and whether or not it should be strived for. So I just want to know your position on that.
Well, we've only got 7 more minutes. I've sort of allotted an hour for this, and we're coming up. So this might be the last or the next to the last question. So keep that in mind. It all depends upon how the deflation occurs. If the deflation occurs because the money stock stays the same and we keep producing more and better, well, then the prices will start falling, and there's nothing wrong with that. On the other hand, if the deflation comes from monetary mismanagement from the Fed or the central bank, well, then deflation and inflation are both problematic. you know, a lot of people say, "Oh my God, deflation is bad," because they conflate deflation with unemployment. Deflation doesn't mean necessarily unemployment. Look, when televisions first came out, it cost, I don't know, the salary of an average person for a month, and now you buy a TV and you know, it's very cheap. When air conditioning first came out, it was very, very expensive, and now air conditioning is a lot cheaper. When computers first came out, I remember doing my PhD dissertation at Columbia in 1960, 68 or so. You know what the size the computers were? They were the size of a house. And you had these punch cards and stuff. And do you know how expensive a computer would be? I don't know, several $1,000,000. Right now, I'm speaking to you on a desktop computer for, you know, a couple of hundred, which is way better than the whole gigantic computer. So there's nothing wrong with falling prices. Just don't think that it necessarily creates unemployment. Now, unemployment is a very bad thing, but deflation is sometimes it's correlated with it, but not causally.
Spec, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that. Demi, if you want to ask the last question, because I think that's all the time we have.
Yeah, I guess I'll ask the last one. I guess we have a lot of questions here. Okay. How does a mismatched time deposit cause and what is that spec?
Austrian business cycle.
Yeah, how does a mismatched time deposit cause an Austrian business cycle?
Well, mismatch is part and parcel of what do you call it? Fractional reserve banking. It's very similar. And the idea behind both of them is these are ways of monetary creation that are not justified by the saving and investment and consumption decisions of the populace. These are ways of creating the business cycle because you have more money floating around than you otherwise would have. And when we have more money floating around than you otherwise would have, the interest rate is below what it otherwise would have been. The originary interest rate stays the same. The originary interest rate is based on time preferences of the population. And that hasn't changed when you have banking changes, whether it's mismatching or what do you call it, fractional reserve banking. So you now have more money in circulation. You have a lower interest rate than you would otherwise have. And this leads investors, as if by an invisible hand, to start producing more roundabout production than they otherwise would have produced. And Roger Garrison once said it's sort of like we're planning on needing 10 bricks and we've only got 9 bricks, and you know something's going to be something's going to fall apart here. Namely, we have too many mines and too many houses and too much heavy industry and not enough light industry. Sometimes I illustrate this to my students by saying, well, suppose the interest rate falls from 4% to 3%. What will that do to an investment of 1 year's duration? Well, not too much. It'll just change it by $1 for $100. But what effect will it have for money receivable in 20 years? Oh, a gigantic difference. So people will be led as if by Adam Smith's invisible hand to make projects for 20 or 40 or 60 years away before they come to fruition, which is not justified by the saving and consumption decisions of the people. So these are ways that the government misallocates resources. Look, let's forget about intertemporal. Let's just talk about intratemporal. Suppose that the optimal allocation of peas and carrots is half peas and half carrots. That's what we want. We want half peas and half carrots. But what the government does is subsidize carrots. And the farmers start producing carrots up to our armpits and hardly any peas. Well, you know, then we have misallocation of resources. That would be if they did it intratemporally. But the monetary mismatching and the fractional reserve banking is intertemporally. What they're doing is misallocating resources intertemporally. And what we want from a welfare point of view is no misallocations whatsoever. No misallocations intra or intertemporally. And monetary mismatching and fractional reserve banking do both of those things. In my view. And I have a book coming out on that. And by the way, I've got some very good people who disagree with me on that. Bill Barnett and I take one position, and Jesus Huerta de Soto, who I admire greatly, and Philip Bagas and Dave Howden take the opposite point of view. It's interesting. Another thing that comes up in my mind is I wrote this book, Defending the Undefendable, and a lot of lefties criticized everything, but there was one chapter that even free enterprise Austrians criticized, and that was counterfeit money. I came out in favor of that. And who was it that disagreed with me? Bob Murphy and Laura Davidson and Matt Mackay, Mackay, and we had a back and forth on that as well. So these are very technical issues that are now debated in the literature. And if you guys are interested in that, email me. I'm wblock@loyno.edu, LOYNO.edu, and I will send you stuff on this. I really can't do justice to this very good question in one more minute, but if you want follow-up, that would be the way to go. wblock, BLOCK, like around the block, at loyno, LOYNO.edu.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's all the time we have.
Yeah, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Walter Blanc, for coming on. That's really cool. Again, thank you for doing this. Yeah, this is really cool. Do you have any like closing statements?
Well, just that it's lovely to be with you guys, and I learned a bit from this. It was a very good experience for me, and I look forward maybe in another month or two, maybe in the fall, we can do it again. Take care, guys, and thanks for having me on your program.
All right,
And
fantastic. Thank you.
send me the URL for this.
Okay, thank you.